Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an article from the front page which refers to the virtual summit that took place yesterday between India and the European Union. During this interaction between the Indian Prime Minister and the President of the European Council and the President of the European Commission, which are two principal organs of the European Union, both the sides have defined themselves as natural partners because of their shared commitment to universal values such as democracy, pluralism, respect for international institutions, and their mutual faith in multilateralism. Say, India as a country and the European Union as a region are considered to be the largest democracies in the world, respectively. Both the sides have displayed a strong commitment for upholding fundamental rights and human rights, and both the societies happen to be diverse and multicultural societies that have tolerated pluralism. Then, with regard to international affairs, both India and the European Union have a long-standing respect towards international institutions such as the UN, and they have firmly believed in multilateral platforms such as the WTO for resolving some of the pressing challenges that the global community is dealing with. Apart from this shared commitment towards universal values, both India and the European Union also have a very strong trading relationship. As we discussed yesterday, the European Union happens to be India's largest trading partner, whereas India happens to be the 9th largest trading partner for the European Union. So, in order to take this important relationship forward, both the sides have held a summit nearly after 3 years, and these are the reasons why yesterday's virtual summit acquires a lot of significance. So, in this context, let us take a look at the key developments that took place at the virtual summit. As we discussed yesterday, both the sides have given a very high priority for reviving the trade relationship, and they have decided to resume the suspended negotiations over their free trade agreement known as the Bilateral Trade and Investment Agreement. To take these FTA negotiations forward, a high-level dialogue has been announced between India's Commerce Minister and the European Union's Trade Commissioner. Then both the sides have committed to a framework for strategic partnership until 2025, and accordingly, they shall be drawing up a 5-year roadmap. Under this strategic partnership framework, both the sides have signed an agreement to promote cooperation in the field of civil nuclear research and development. This agreement has been signed between European Union's Euratom and India's Department of Atomic Energy. Euratom, or the European Atomic Energy Community, was established through the Euratom Treaty in 1957, and its establishment even predates the formation of the European Union itself. In fact, this was one of the first regional groupings that was formed in the European region in the post-World War era, and it brought a number of European countries together, which would later lay the foundation for the establishment of the European Union. Euratom promotes civil nuclear cooperation amongst the member countries of the European Union, and India's Department of Atomic Energy has tied up with this European community in order to promote joint research and development in the field of civil nuclear power. Then both the sides have also agreed to renew their science and technology agreement by another 5 years, with the intention of turning their economies into resource-efficient economies, and with the objective of establishing a circular economy. See, under this area of cooperation, the objective of both the sides is to reduce wastage and to alter their consumption behavior in the interest of sustainability. This approach towards consumption and waste management not only makes the economy resource efficient, but it also makes the economy greener. Then both the sides are striving towards the establishment of a circular economy in which waste is completely eliminated through the continuous cycling or looping of resources that are required to power economic growth based on the 5R concept of waste management. This includes refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, and recycle. Under this concept of resource and waste management, precious resources are reduced, they are repurposed, they are reused and refabricated, and they are recycled in order to establish a continuous loop or a continuous cycle for the usage of resources. So such an economy which eliminates waste through the continuous usage of resources is said to be a circular economy, and in such an economy, the available precious resources are utilized efficiently with little cost on the environment. Then, apart from these bilateral issues of cooperation, both the sides have also discussed a number of global and security issues as well. This includes a discussion on the recent border clashes between India and China, a discussion on the ongoing border tensions between India and Pakistan, and an exchange of views on the ongoing tensions with Iran, especially the geopolitical conflict between the United States and Iran. Then, along with this, the European Union has also expressed concerns with regard to a few domestic issues of India. Representatives of the EU have expressed concern about the human rights and security situation in Jammu and Kashmir, especially after the suspension of Article 370 by India. They have also expressed concern about the controversial provisions of the Citizenship Amendment Act and its impact on India's plural society. Then they have also expressed concern about the Prime Minister's call for making India self-reliant. A number of European companies are concerned that this strategy of India could increase protectionist measures, which could create an entry barrier for European companies to enter into the Indian market. But the Indian government has assured the EU that its approach towards self-reliance is designed to meet its domestic demands and integrate the domestic economy with the global supply chain. And it has reassured the Europeans that there won't be any protectionist measures and it shall not have any external impact. Next, in a related column on page number 7, the writer, who is from a European think tank, makes a case for why India should believe in the European Union. As we discussed, the writer touches upon the potential for trade between India and the European Union. See, according to 2018 data, the European Union invested around 67.7 billion euros into the Indian economy. This European investment accounted for nearly 22% of India's total FDI inflows. But in comparison, during the same period, European Union invested around 175 billion euros in the Chinese economy. So clearly, there is still a lot of scope left to bring more European investments into the Indian economy, especially because, just like India, even Europe is trying to reduce its dependency on China. When it comes to trade and investments with China, even the European countries have felt the impact of China's assertiveness. So even European governments, European companies, and the European Union as a whole, they are trying to reduce their dependency on China, and this fits in line with India's economic and strategic objectives as far as China and its assertiveness is concerned. So in this context, the writer hopes that the free trade negotiations that have been revived succeeds between India and the EU, because it could facilitate larger movement of trade, investment and people between the two regions. Then apart from trade, another key area of cooperation between the two sides could be the domain of climate change. See, the European Union has displayed a strong commitment towards tackling climate change and global warming, and it has announced an ambitious target to turn the European economy carbon neutral by 2050 under the historic European Green Deal that was adopted last year. This ambitious objective of the European Union fits right in line with India's objectives as well, because even India has displayed a strong commitment to tackle climate change and global warming. The European Union not only has the required financial means to achieve this target, but it also has the required technology, and hence cooperation with the European Union in this domain could help India reduce its dependency on fossil fuels. Then the writer also says that European Union could be a trusted and reliable partner for India with regard to India's geopolitical and strategic issues as well. For example, be it China's assertiveness and China's aggression at the border areas, be it the emergence of maritime security challenges in the Indo-Pacific, or the menace of terrorism in South Asia, which happens to be largely state-sponsored. The European Union could help India tackle all these geopolitical and strategic issues by taking care of India's critical defense requirements, by providing intelligence sharing, etc. Then in a world that has been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic, the European Union can be a great economic partner for India, mainly because of its economic clout. If you look at the next generation European Union proposal, the European Union has announced a massive 750 billion euro package in order to help revive not just the European economy but also the global economy. This goes on to show that European governments, European central banks and the European Union as a whole have the capability to raise massive amounts of debt in order to help revive the European economy and as well as the global economy that has been massively hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Then finally, in a world where major powers such as the United States and China are threatening to dismantle the rules-based world order and the multilateral world order, India and the EU can work together to strengthen multilateral institutions such as the World Trade Organization, the United Nations and its related organizations, and they can help enforce a strict rules-based order. Now let's take up an editorial from page number 6, which strikes an alert for the Indian economy on the account of rising inflation in the middle of the pandemic. See, latest economic data shows that retail inflation has shot up to 6.1% in the month of June, which is above the RBI's mandated inflation target of 6%. See, the sudden shoot up in retail inflation to 6.1% has come as a shock to policy planners and economic experts, because over the last few months, demand in the Indian economy has been at one of its lowest points, and this low demand existed even before the COVID-19 pandemic due to a structural slowdown in the Indian economy, and the demand had declined further as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown. I hope everyone is aware as to how inflation is determined based on the demand-supply equation. Even though demand has declined considerably over the last few months, the sudden increase in inflation has come as a shock, and it comes as a cause of great concern because it could very well push the Indian economy towards stagflation. See, there is no doubt that the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic and the imposition of a total lockdown has completely disrupted the supply chains. This disruption has resulted in severe shortages of essential items, and it is bound to lead to a price rise. But the expectation was that the consistent decline in demand over the last few months should have helped stabilize the prices, and such high inflation numbers should not have been recorded. But contrary to these predictions, the structural slowdown in the Indian economy and the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown has pushed up the prices of most essential items, even though demand is actually at one of its lowest points. CPI inflation data shows that prices of essential items such as food and beverages, protein sources such as pulses, meat and milk, and even fuel has increased considerably over the last 4 to 5 months, and this threatens to push India towards stagflation. Then upon this, the pandemic, the lockdown and the decline in demand has pushed companies to protect their profit margins by reducing the size of their workforce, which results in increased unemployment, and by increasing the prices of their goods and services in order to increase their profit margins. So the rise in prices accompanied by rising unemployment will further pull down demand, increasing the possibility of India staring at a stagflation situation. The only silver lining in the middle of all this happens to be the rapid and timely onset of the monsoon, which indicates a normal monsoon season for this year, and this comes as a reassurance for the Indian economy. Especially for Indian agriculture, a normal monsoon season guarantees a good harvest, and this should help in moderating prices, leading to the stabilization of at least food inflation. But as long as retail inflation remains above RBI's inflation target of 6%, it severely restricts the monetary policy options that are available to the RBI. Because if the RBI tries to promote growth and demand by introducing more money supply, it increases the risk of rising inflation. This again brings us to the possibility of India staring at a stagflation situation, which is basically an economic policy dilemma. A stagflation situation is said to exist when these 4 conditions exist. That is, when demand is weak, when growth is slow, and when inflation is rising, and when the unemployment rate continues to remain high consistently. Then a stagflation situation is said to exist, which poses a grave economic policy challenge for both the central bank and the government. Because in such a situation, if the RBI and the government, if they try to revive growth, demand, and if they try to reduce unemployment through their monetary policy and fiscal policy respectively, then it increases the prospect of rising inflation. On the other hand, if they try to control inflation by controlling money supply, it will further dampen growth and demand, leading to more unemployment. So in this context, the editorial says that the RBI and the central government will have to work out all possible options in order to prevent India's decline into a stagflation situation. Now let's take up an article from page number 10. The Drug Controller General of India has granted approval for India's first indigenous conjugate vaccine for preventing pneumonia. This vaccine, known as pneumococcal polysaccharide conjugate vaccine, has been developed by the Serum Institute of Pune. This vaccine is said to provide active immunization for pneumonia that is caused by Streptococcus pneumonia. Until now, this vaccine was being imported from licensed manufacturers located in foreign countries, but now it can be replaced by the indigenous vaccine that has been approved by the DCGI after having gone through all the 3 phases of clinical trials. Then for the sake of prelims, you need to understand what is a conjugate vaccine as well. See, we know that pathogens consist of a molecule known as antigen, which is identified by our immune system to generate an immune response and produce antibodies against these antigens. It is based on this principle that vaccines are developed. Vaccines generally contain a weakened or inactive version of these antigens in order to train our immune system to identify the antigen and produce antibodies against them. But in a conjugate vaccine, a weak antigen is combined with a strong antigen. In this case, the strong antigen acts as the carrier, and this combination is designed in order to train our immune system to generate a strong immune response to the weak antigen after having encountered the strong antigen which is acting as a carrier. Now let's take up the next article. According to an assessment conducted by the United Nations Development Programme and according to a study published in Lancet, the popular science journal, India's population is set to peak in the year 2047. At its peak, India is said to register a population of around 1.61 billion, and after hitting this peak, the population is set to decline, and by the end of this century, India's population is expected to fall to just around 1.03 billion. The study also goes on to say that if India manages to achieve all its sustainable development goal targets, then its population could fall to as low as 929 million, but still India would have the world's largest population by the end of this century. As per various population estimates, India is expected to overtake China very soon, and it is expected to hit its peak in 2047, and from here onwards, the Indian population will decline and it will settle somewhere around 1 billion by the end of this century. These estimates, of course, are based on the assumption that all women will have access to contraception and sex education, which will directly have an impact in reducing the total fertility rate. See, total fertility rate or TFR is a key metric or an indicator that is used in demographic studies or human geography in order to project a country's population growth. By definition, TFR is nothing but the average number of children that a woman will have over her lifetime. If the total fertility rate stands at 2.1, then a country is said to witness a decline in its population. Because a TFR of 2.1 will help in replenishing the population, and hence this fertility level is referred to as replacement level fertility. That is, if the TFR is at 2.1, the population stabilizes and it provides for replacing the deaths with newer births. So at a TFR of 2.1 and below, the population is set to decline, whereas a TFR of more than 2.1 will result in an increase in the country's population. That's the reason why, if you look at regions with low fertility rates, such as North America, Europe and Southeast Asia, the TFR stands at just 1.75, which is way below the replacement level fertility. That's the reason why these regions are witnessing a declining population. But you should also know that a country's TFR is a factor of its development status. There is a stark difference in TFR that we observe when you compare developed countries with developing and underdeveloped countries. In developed countries, where there is better access to contraception and where there is sex education and where the socio-economic indicators are above average, we find that the TFR rate is always below 2.1. Whereas in developing and underdeveloped countries with a weak socio-economic profile, we always find that the TFR rate is above 2.1. The same logic applies within a country as well. Basically, TFR exposes the regional development divide. If you look within India, the developed states that are located in the south and the west, they register a lower TFR. States such as Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra and Gujarat, they have a lower TFR as compared to the underdeveloped states of the north and the east, such as UP, Bihar, Odisha, etc. Next, the study has also projected that the global population will hit its peak in 2061, and at this peak, the global population is set to stand at around 9.73 billion. From this peak, the global population is set to decline, and by the end of the century, the global population is set to fall to just around 8.79 billion. According to these estimates, by the end of this century, India is all set to be the most populous nation of the world, followed by Nigeria, China, United States and Pakistan. But interestingly, by the end of this century, 4 out of the top 5 countries will register a declining population. This includes India, China, US and Pakistan. But Nigeria will stand out as an exception, and it will continue to register population growth throughout this century. Now let's take up an article from page number 11. India's ambassador to Russia has called upon the Russian government to collaborate with India to jointly explore and exploit the hydrocarbon reserves that are located in the exclusive economic zone of Vietnam. In previous sessions, when we spoke about the South China Sea dispute, we have discussed the hydrocarbon potential of Vietnam and how both India and Russia are working with Vietnam separately to explore and exploit this hydrocarbon potential. We have also discussed how Russia is seeking to enter the Indo-Pacific region in a big way by tying up with friendly countries such as Vietnam and Philippines. So in the middle of this ongoing geopolitical changes in the Indo-Pacific region, India has asked Russia to collaborate with it to jointly explore and exploit the hydrocarbon reserves of Vietnam. If such an alignment between India and Russia were to take place, then it would open up a number of new challenges and confrontation with China, and it could lead to geopolitical realignments in the Indo-Pacific region. Now let's take up an article from page number 16. See, Indian fruit farmers have been affected from a number of years by an exotic, alien and invasive pest known as the woolly whitefly. According to the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, pests damage nearly 30 to 35% of India's crops and thereby place a huge financial and economic burden on the farmers and as well as on India's agriculture sector. This invasive alien species is native to Jamaica, where it was first described in 1896. Later, it had spread to the United States by 1909, and with the growth of the global economy, this invasive species has entered India as well. Studies conducted by the Indian Council of Agricultural Research has shown that the woolly whitefly might have entered India through imports, and it is the transportation of the infested fruit seedlings that has introduced the woolly whitefly to the Indian subcontinent. The woolly whitefly is not just an invasive exotic species, but it is also polyphagous. We have studied in previous sessions that alien species or invasive exotic species, they threaten the native biodiversity, including the native plants, animals and birds, etc. And since the woolly whitefly is polyphagous, meaning that it feeds on various kinds of food, it poses a grave threat to India's horticulture crops such as fruits. According to this article, a team of Indian researchers have identified 3 types of natural predators which can keep a check on the population of this invasive pest. This includes 2 types of ladybird beetle and the green lacewing fly. These indigenously found bugs in their adult stage can easily feed on the woolly whiteflies when they are still in their grub stage. See, generally such insects and pests, they go through 4 life stages. This includes egg, grub, pupa and adult. According to this team of researchers, the adult ladybird beetle and the adult green lacewing fly can feed on the grubs of the woolly whiteflies, leading to their elimination. Such natural predatory techniques are not only cost effective, but they are also environment friendly as compared to pesticides. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. He was an Indian freedom fighter and was popularly known as Punjab Kesari. He travelled to the United States and founded the Indian Home Rule League in New York and also a monthly journal known as Young India. He was elected the President of the Indian National Congress in the Calcutta Special Session of 1920. In 1921, he founded the Servants of the People Society a non-profit welfare organization in Lahore. While leading a non-violent protest against the Simon Commission, he was fatally injured in a violent police crackdown that led to his untimely death. Whom does this description refer to? The correct answer is option B, Lala Lajpat Rai. This question has been asked because the 100 years ago article from page number 7 makes a reference to a lecture delivered by Lala Lajpat Rai against British rule. Now let's take up the next practice question. The Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana is implemented by the National Skill Development Corporation. Option C is the right answer. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 9, Prime Minister Modi has called upon the country's youth to skill, reskill and upskill themselves in order to overcome the economic impact of the pandemic, while he was speaking on the occasion of the World Youth Skills Day, which also marks the 5th anniversary of the Skill India Mission. See, the Skill India Mission was launched in 2015 under the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and one of the initiatives under the Skill India Mission happens to be the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, under which the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras are established and run by the National Skill Development Corporation. Now let's take up the next question. The state of food security and nutrition in the world report is brought out by the Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Fund for Agriculture Development, United Nations Children Fund or UNICEF, UN World Food Programme, World Health Organization. The correct answer is option D. It is brought out by all the 5 organizations. This question has been asked because according to this article, the state of food security and nutrition in the world report that is brought out by these 5 organizations has pointed out that the global fight against hunger has been disrupted due to the economic slowdown that has been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So based on this finding, the report raises a concern that the world may not achieve its goal of zero hunger by 2030, which is one of the most important sustainable development goals of the UN. Now let's take up the next practice question. The Tangjung Manorama incident is related to the misuse of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Option B is the right answer. See, the Tangjung Manorama incident dates back to 2004 and it took place in the state of Manipur. It refers to the brutal killing and the possible gang rape of Tangjung Manorama, allegedly by soldiers of the Assam Rifles who had been deployed in the state on counter-insurgency duties. I hope you're aware that in areas that have been declared as disturbed areas, the controversial Armed Forces Special Powers Act is extended in order to provide special protection to the armed forces and the police forces. Under this legislation, the security forces enjoy complete immunity for their actions, and this has always led to a debate between national security and human rights. See, in 2004, Tangjung Manorama was picked up by a unit of Assam Rifles who believed her to be an insurgent working for a local insurgent outfit. But a few days later, she turned up dead, leading to allegations of torture, possible gang rape, and murder allegedly committed by the soldiers of Assam Rifles. This incident led to massive protests in the northeast, especially in Manipur and as well as in Delhi. And in a historic protest on the 14th of July, 12 Manipuri women, they stripped themselves naked in front of the Assam Rifles camp and protested against the draconian provisions of the AFSPA. These protests led to the shifting of the Assam Rifles camp, and it even pushed the state government and the central government to set up an inquiry committee known as the BP Jeevan Reddy Committee. Even though this committee did not conclusively prove the allegations, it pointed out that prima facie evidence was available to indicate that these allegations were true, and it clearly highlighted the misuse of AFSPA provisions by the security forces in various disturbed areas where AFSPA is in operation, and it said that these draconian provisions of AFSPA promote the security forces to commit violence against the locals, particularly against women. Even in the later years, AFSPA has attracted a lot of controversy, and various committees and even the Supreme Court have openly spoken against it. This includes the Santosh Hegde Committee, the Justice J.S. Verma Committee, which was constituted after the Nirbhaya gang rape case, and even the Supreme Court has made several observations in few cases, indicating that the absolute immunity granted to security forces under AFSPA is quite excessive, and it results in frequent abuse of human rights. So according to this article on page number 11, this day on which a group of Manipuri women protested against the killing of Tangjung Manorama is marked as the Anti-Repression Day. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2016 prelims paper. Consider the following statements. The Sustainable Development Goals were first proposed in 1972 by a global think tank called the Club of Rome. The Sustainable Development Goals have to be achieved by 2030. The first statement is incorrect, but the second statement is correct. So option B is the right answer. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, analyze the recent developments and issues in India-EU relations. The second question, rising prices despite the depressed demand during the pandemic is cause for disquiet. Evaluate. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.